In the depths of the endless sky plains, where even spiritual sense dared not linger, an unseen struggle was quietly unfolding. Fate trembled in silence, and the price of blood had yet to be fully paid. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. It had been half a year since Han Li departed from the drifting cloud sect. After leaving Heavenly South, he entered the Mulan Plains without delay, meticulously concealing both his cultivation and his true identity. In the beginning, everything proceeded smoothly. Assuming the guise of an unaffiliated cultivator, he safely passed through numerous Mulan tribes, even exchanging cultivation insights with a cultivator of the soaring tribes. However, after traversing most of the plains and reaching the southern regions, disaster descended without warning. In a desolate wasteland, far removed from the soaring tribe's territory, Han Li had, as he routinely did, released his gold-devouring beetles. He was preparing to select his strongest batch for reproduction when fate intervened. A mid-nascent soul-stage elder of the soaring tribes happened upon him while in pursuit of a demon bird. At that very moment, the elder himself was controlling a fully mature gold-devouring beetle. The rainbow skirt grass was simply too convenient, too reliable. Having used it countless times without incident, Han Li had grown careless. He had not laid down any high-grade concealment spell formations. As a result, the soaring tribe's elder beheld Han Li's beetle swarm in full view. When the elder saw the sea of 10,000 gold-devouring beetles hovering above Han Li, he nearly flew past in sheer shock. Abandoning his pursuit of the demon bird without hesitation, he immediately demanded that Han Li follow him to meet one of their tribe's so-called holy women. Such a condition was something Han Li could never accept. Without delay, he launched his attack. Multiple supreme techniques were unleashed in succession, supplemented by the power of his second nascent soul. In a flash of violent brilliance, the elder's physical body was utterly destroyed. Yet Han Li's heart sank soon after. The soaring tribe's elder cultivated an exceedingly bizarre technique, one that allowed him to split his nascent soul into 7 separate divisions, each proficient in escape arts. Amid a fleeting lapse of vigilance, Han Li allowed one of them to slip away. Only then did he realize he had stirred a hornet's nest. Not daring to linger for even an instant, he fled southward through the night. Several days later, however, Han Li abruptly sensed danger closing in. Through some unknown method, the soaring tribes had locked onto him. Numerous nascent soul cultivators were now in pursuit among them, even one of the 4 late nascent soul stage experts of the soaring tribes. Battle after battle followed in relentless succession. Han Li slew several high-grade cultivators, but during one moment of distraction, the late nascent soul cultivator landed a devastating blow upon him. Had it not been for the myriad-year spirit milk and his blood shadow evasion technique, his life would have ended then and there. Though he managed to temporarily shake off pursuit, an even more troubling problem soon surfaced. Perhaps due to the severe depletion of strength and the accumulation of injuries from continuous combat, the baleful qi within his body erupted violently, beginning a terrifying backlash. Fortunately, with his formidable spiritual sense, Han Li detected the signs early and forcibly suppressed it using secret techniques. Even so, his already dire situation worsened further. Left with no alternative, Han Li sought guidance from Monarch Soul Divergence. As an eccentric being who had lived for over 10,000 years, Monarch Soul Divergence immediately proposed the Pestilence Demon Soul Lock Seal, a method to temporarily suppress the baleful qi. However, the price was staggering. Until Han Li could find a way to completely dissolve the baleful qi, he would have to seal both the pestilence demons and the baleful qi within his own body. This would restrain most of the baleful qi, but at the cost of sealing away the majority of his cultivation. Should he recklessly use his magic power during this period, the baleful qi and pestilence demons would immediately retaliate. Fully aware of the consequences, Han Li hesitated. Yet, as he continued to flee, the baleful qi's backlash grew even more violent. Driven into desperation, he hastily descended into a patch of dense shrubbery. Without even the time to set up a protective formation, he activated the Pestilence Demon Soul Lock seal in frantic urgency. By the time Ying Lu arrived, Han Li was already in the final stages of the technique. Mu Teng parted the bushes just as Han Li's face transformed into the ghastly visage of one of the 5 pestilence demons sealed within him. The sight was horrifying beyond measure, frightening the youth half to death. To Mu Teng, that ghostly face was now firmly etched as Han Li's true appearance. Recalling this, Han Li could not help but let out a bitter smile. Although I can temporarily restrain the baleful qi, the vast majority of my cultivation has been sealed, Han Li muttered softly. Still, it is fortunate that I am escorting mortals to the Endless Sky Temple. Nothing should go awry along the way. Monarch Soul Divergence let out a cold chuckle. Though your cultivation is sealed, and you cannot wield your ancient treasures or flying swords, you may still command your gold-devouring beetles and your second nascent soul. However, you gave the nascent soul-grade puppet you refined to your senior martial brother Lu before departing, and most of your core formation puppets to that concubine of yours. Those would be quite useful right about now. Han Lai replied indifferently. I did not know when I would return to Heavenly South. Leaving them behind was a precaution. Even if senior martial brother Chung soon perishes, Lulu will have the nascent soul puppet to aid him. Mu Peiling will also remain safe with the tortoise puppets I entrusted to her. Otherwise, I would not have felt at ease heading toward Great Jin. In that case, don't complain. Should you encounter danger, Monarch Soul Divergence said disapprovingly. After a brief silence, Han Li's expression shifted. Is there any way to temporarily lift the Pestilence Demon Soul Lock seal once it has been placed? My gold-devouring beetles and second nascent soul can easily handle core formation opponents, but encountering a nascent soul cultivator would be extremely dangerous. I do not know how long it will take before I can completely dissolve the baleful qi. Temporarily lifting the seal, Monarch Soul Divergence paused, then slowly replied, It would be impossible for others, but with the treasures you possess, it may be feasible. That said, the cost will be severe. What cost? As long as it does not affect my future cultivation, I will accept it. It is better than losing my life at a critical moment. In that case, it is quite simple. Each time you dispel the seal, 2 drops of myriad-year spirit milk will be required. I will pass you another secret art to release the pestilence demons and temporarily allow the baleful qi to circulate. Under your current condition, your magic power will be restored for approximately 2 hours. After that, the spirit milk will be fully consumed and your cultivation will once again be sealed. Furthermore, each release allows the baleful qi to erode a portion of your soul. After a certain number of times, even the pestilence demons will no longer be able to restrain the backlash. Myriad-year spirit milk is precious, but not as precious as my life, Han Li said solemnly. Still, worsening the baleful qi backlash is no small matter. Will this leave lasting consequences even after I eventually dissolve it? There will certainly be consequences, Monarch Soul Divergence replied. Given your current state, you can likely lift the seal no more than 5 or 6 times before the pestilence demons lose control. You must decide for yourself whether the gains outweigh the losses. There is nothing to deliberate, Han Li said decisively. I will only use it in moments of life and death. Senior, please pass the technique to me. I will recite the incantation only once. Remember it well, Monarch Soul Divergence warned. As the incantation was spoken, Han Li closed his eyes, engraving every word into his memory. Opening his eyes, he calmly said, Very well. The technique is not particularly complex. After a few days of comprehension, I should be able to employ it. Of course. It is merely a common method for lifting seals, Monarch Soul Divergence replied. But youngster Han, do you truly intend to accompany these mortals to the Endless Sky Temple? You must know that this event will draw many soaring tribes cultivators. Has Senior heard the saying that the most dangerous places are often the safest? Han Lai replied calmly. If I were to hide alone, I could evade detection for some time. But with the baleful qi entwined around me, I must hurry toward the great Jin Empire. My pursuers will search for lone travelers like myself. In that case, it is better to blend in among the cultivators gathered near the temple. With so many present, it would be impossible to inspect everyone. After months in the Mulan Plains, I am confident I can disguise myself as a low-grade cultivator. Besides, the temple lies along the path to Great Jin. It seems I was meddling unnecessarily. Monarch Soul Divergence chuckled, falling silent thereafter. Han Li let out a soft sigh, then asked Silver Moon, "How are you? You were also gravely injured in that final battle." "Thank you for your concern," Silver Moon replied faintly. "As an artifact spirit, such wounds do not affect me greatly. However, my fox has suffered severe damage and will be unable to assist Master for some time." Relieved, Han Li replied gently, "That is fine. I will act more cautiously from now on. There should be no need for you to intervene. Rest and recover." "Yes, Master." Silver Moon forced out the response, then fell silent. Han Li grimaced inwardly, letting out a wry chuckle. He sat quietly in the carriage for a moment longer before brushing his hand across his storage pouch. A foot-long jade box appeared in his palm, its surface sealed with several shimmering white talismans. Han Li gently traced the talismans with his fingers, his expression flickering with uncertainty. Another perspective. On the day Han Li struck down the physical body of the soaring tribe's mid-nascent soul cultivator, a portion of the man's nascent soul managed to escape. However, the fully matured gold-devouring beetle under his control was left behind. Familiar with the beetle's nature, Han Li easily captured it alive, using his second nascent soul, and sealed it within a jade box. Originally, he had planned to wait until reaching a completely safe moment before examining the differences between this mature, gold-devouring beetle and his own swarm. Yet given his current suppression of cultivation, he could no longer afford such leisure. If the mature beetle's abilities far exceeded his expectations and it were to break free of its restraints, the consequences would be disastrous, especially with his present strength, which would make restraining it nearly impossible. With this in mind, Han Li drew in a deep breath. He suddenly flipped his wrist, producing several formation flags of various hues in his palm. With a flick of his fingers, the flags scattered outward, forming layers of restrictions that enveloped the entire carriage. Placing the jade box upon his knee, Han Li slowly closed his eyes. A flash of dark light flickered, and a black-green nascent soul emerged from the crown of his head. The tiny nascent soul rubbed its hands together before summoning the jet-black yin-sifting banner into its grasp. Because Han Li had long entrusted the banner to his second nascent soul for refinement, it was the only magic treasure capable of bypassing the restraints imposed by the pestilence demon Solok seal. Gold-devouring beetles were immune to heat and cold alike, impervious to blades and conventional attacks. At present, the only method Han Li possessed that could truly threaten them lay in the yin-essence devil heads formed by the banner refinement techniques he had once extracted from the soul of an elder of the yin-sifting sect. Of course, erasing the soul imprint upon a fully matured gold-devouring beetle was not something that could be accomplished swiftly. In truth, had the beetle's master truly perished rather than merely suffered severe weakening, Han Li would not have dared attempt such a refinement at all. Even so, he remained exceedingly cautious. Multiple layers of restrictions were placed in advance, all to prevent the mature beetle from breaking free and wreaking havoc. The black-green nascent soul raised its small banner and waved it gently above its head. A foot-long cloud of sinister devilish qi emerged swirling thickly in the air. The nascent soul leapt forward and vanished into the cloud, which then sank downward, wrapping itself tightly around the jade box. From within the box, a soft buzzing sound arose, then rapidly grew louder and more frantic. The devilish cloud churned violently, and the buzzing sharpened into a piercing, deafening whine. Yet Han Li remained utterly unmoved. His hands were locked into an incantation seal, his body as still as stone. With so many layers of restriction in place, he had no fear of the noise alerting the grey heron tribe outside. He calmly began drawing out the beetle's primal soul. The arduous refinement process had begun. The members of the Grey Heron tribe were deeply curious about immortal Han, yet ever since he entered the carriage, he had not emerged even once. Clan leader Yinglu had personally forbidden anyone from disturbing the immortal's cultivation, much to the disappointment of many eager youths. 10 days later, the caravan encountered a herd of wild goats across a canyon and successfully hunted several of them. After half a month passed without incident, Yinglu finally felt a measure of relief. A few days later, still the group arrived at a particularly secure resting area. The Endless Sky Temple cultivators had previously used magic power to establish temporary encampments nearby, serving as rest stops for passing tribes. Once the Day of Spirit Release concluded, these encampments would be dismantled immediately. As Yinglu pondered this, a sudden sound rang out overhead. Instinctively, he raised his head. A streak of dazzling white light flashed across the sky. A faint silhouette could be discerned within it before it vanished in the blink of an eye. When Yinglu and the youths witnessed this, an uproar broke out. Yinglu frowned, unease creeping into his heart. From his experiences during the previous sacred war, he knew such streaks of light were produced by high-grade immortals. Scenes like this were exceedingly rare. High-grade immortals usually flew far above the reach of mortal eyes. If his memory served him correctly, this was already the fourth streak of light he had seen flying at low altitude in recent days. Had something significant occurred? Had a tribe been robbed of its tribute? Despite his confusion, Yinglu ultimately felt reassured. With high-grade immortals patrolling the skies, their safety should be assured for now. After some thought, he loudly called out to the escort behind him and urged them to increase their pace. Unbeknownst to Yinglu, the white streak of light had actually swept a 50-kilometer perimeter at low altitude before continuing southward. Not far away, a streak of crimson light followed closely in its wake. When the two lights met, their radiance faded, revealing a middle-aged man clad in pale yellow fur garments and a beautiful woman in her late 20s, dressed in flowing palace robes. The middle-aged man took the initiative to clasp his hands in greeting. "So it is Immortal Shu," he said. "I found nothing on my side. How about you?" "Brother Li does. It looked like I've discovered anything." The woman replied coldly, her expression grim. The man sighed, anxiety evident on his face. "In the past few days, we have searched over 1,000 kilometers without finding a single trace. Even with his concealment techniques, someone of our cultivation should have uncovered something by now. Perhaps we should interrogate the tribute caravans traveling below. It seems Immortal Li is truly tempted by the reward," the woman said with a cold laugh. "But is the venomous dragon pill truly worth your life?" The man paused, then asked in confusion, "What do you mean by that?" Could it be that Immortal Shu is not tempted by the reward? Rather than answering directly, the woman asked indifferently, "When you accepted the mission, what did the Nascent Soul elders tell you?" After a moment's hesitation, the man answered honestly, "My superior said that a foreign Nascent Soul cultivator trespassed into the Endless Sky Plains and grievously injured one of our elders. He must be captured alive. Since he is wounded, core formation cultivators like us should be able to handle him." The woman snorted, a mocking smile appearing on her lips. "Brother Li, you arrived too late and do not know the full truth. If it were me, I would never wish to encounter this foreign cultivator." "Since Immortal Shu speaks with such certainty, there must be a reason," the man said solemnly. "Please enlighten me." After a brief silence, the woman sighed. "We have known each other for many years. I will speak plainly, so you do not foolishly throw your life away. I arrived earlier and heard certain information from one of the elders. It is true that the foreign cultivator is at the Nascent Soul stage and severely wounded, but the one who injured him was not a Nascent Soul cultivator. It was one of the Grand Immortals." "What? A Grand Immortal?" the man exclaimed in shock. "That is correct," she replied. "Even then, the Grand Immortal only succeeded through a sneak attack, when the foreign cultivator was surrounded by numerous elders. Before that, he had already slain 3 Nascent Soul Immortals. It is said his methods were vicious beyond measure and that he remained unshaken even under heavy assault. Despite suffering severe injuries, he still escaped using a secret technique. Her expression darkened. From what I see, this foreign cultivator is likely on par with our grand immortal. In that case, no matter how wounded he may be, killing two mere core formation cultivators like us would be effortless. I have no desire to die for a venomous dragon pill, she continued coldly. Furthermore, I suspect the nascent soul elders who dispatched us are using us as expendable bait. Didn't they place soul-guiding marks on us before sending us out? They claimed it was to locate us if we were in danger, but in truth they intend to force him out of hiding. Once we fall, they will simply use the marks to trace him. A chill ran through the man's body. They would treat us as cannon fodder, he said angrily. Then what should we do? It is simple, the woman replied calmly. We have already searched this area. There is no need to continue. We will report back accordingly and avoid further danger. If someone else finds him, so be it. If not, it matters little. When the day of spirit release arrives, all immortals will gather at the temples to pay their respects, and we will be summoned as well. After a brief moment of hesitation, the man nodded decisively. From what you've said, the venomous dragon pill may be valuable, but my life is far more likely to be lost in the process. Many thanks for the warning, Immortal Shu. The woman smiled faintly. Good. Then let us rest at the temple encampment for now. Many tribes have delivered tributes these past days. Perhaps we can find something useful in advance. We can always conduct further searches periodically while inspecting the offerings. Naturally, the middle-aged man raised no objections. Soon after, the red and white streaks of light flew directly southward, disappearing into the distance. In a completely sealed chamber stood a 3-meter-tall offering table, encircled by more than a dozen formation flags of varying colors. Each flag glimmered faintly, their lights interweaving to form a temporary spell formation. Atop the table rested a dark green formation plate from which waves of green ki surged unceasingly. Within the rolling mist, the vague silhouette of a nascent soul could be seen sitting cross-legged, its form rising and falling rhythmically as though it were breathing the smoke in and out, cultivating amid the haze. At the four corners of the chamber sat 4 elderly men, each cross-legged and holding a dark green spell flag. The tips of the flags all pointed toward the circular plate at the center, releasing thin strands of green mist that slowly drifted forward and merged with the formation. The scene was eerily tranquil, as though frozen within a painting. Not a single sound disturbed the air. After an indeterminate stretch of time, fatigue gradually appeared on the faces of the 4 old men. At the same time, the nascent soul within the green mist grew noticeably more stable, its form becoming clearer and more defined. The red-haired elder, seated in one corner, withdrew his spell flag and rose to his feet. He clasped his hands toward the other 3 and spoke solemnly. I truly must thank you, fellow Taoists, for your great efforts. In a few more days, Junior Marshal Brother Gui should be able to recover. Hearing this, the other 3 also put away their spell flags. Among them, the pale, beardless old man hurriedly returned the salute and chuckled. There is no need for Brother Hun to be so courteous. I have known Brother Guy for many years. Lending him a bit of strength is only natural. The red-haired elder cast a glance toward the nascent soul seated within the mist and said sincerely, regardless, this kindness will not be forgotten by either my junior marshal brother or myself. The pale old man laughed lightly. Please, fellow Taoist Hun, there is no need for such formality. The red-haired elder's expression darkened, and he spoke in a low voice. Indeed. We have been confined here since the beginning solely to assist Immortal Gui in stabilizing his damaged nascent soul. Yet we still do not know whether any further information has surfaced regarding that foreign cultivator. We all know how exceedingly rare it is for gold-devouring beetles to reproduce. To think that someone could control more than 10,000 of them, it is truly difficult to believe. I arrived too late to participate in the battle that attempted to trap him, but judging by the fact that he slew 3 nascent soul immortals, that man must have been terrifying. At these words, the other 3 elders exchanged glances, faint traces of dread surfacing on their faces. The pale old man let out a long sigh. How could there be such a monstrous individual? Beyond the gold-devouring beetles, he also wields purple flames and golden lightning. Among the first group of nascent soul immortals who blocked his path, 2 perished outright due to these techniques. The golden lightning imprisoned one immortal's nascent soul, while the purple flame effortlessly obliterated it. As for the second immortal, no amount of caution would have saved him. The plump old man added grimly, and that is not all. He also commands fearsome magic treasures. He possesses a strange set of gold azure flying swords, some 60 or 70 in number, each one unimaginably sharp. Countless treasures were destroyed by those blades. And then there were those wicked wings upon his back, capable of instantaneous lightning movement without even an incantation. He was nearly impossible to restrain. Brother Hun may speak lightly of it, but when the 7 of us surrounded him, our backs were drenched in cold sweat from the sheer terror of death. Just as we were preparing to withdraw, one of the Grand Elders fortunately arrived in time and launched a sneak attack, striking him with the elemental immortal rest palm. Though grievously injured, the foreign cultivator immediately transformed into a crimson blur and tore through our encirclement. We attempted to track him with our spiritual sense, but there was not a single trace left behind. The Grand Elder said that the man had already fled hundreds of kilometers away. Pursuit was impossible. The red-haired Elder's expression turned unsightly. Could it be that this man is a renowned top-grade cultivator from one of the great sects of the Great Jin Empire? No wonder only one of Junior Marshal Brother Guy's 6 Essence Soul Divisions barely managed to escape. There is no need for Brother Hun to be overly concerned, the pale old man replied calmly. You know the might of the elemental immortal rest palm. Even if that person escaped this land, the blow must have gravely damaged his cultivation. There is no need to fear him for now. Moreover, the guest accompanying the saintess from Great Jin is currently residing in a nearby Endless Sky temple. If the foreign cultivator truly hails from Great Jin, that guest should know something of his peculiar abilities. Once we gather more information, dealing with him will become far easier. His voice grew colder. Even if he truly belongs to a powerful sect of Great Jin, the Grand Elders will not let him go after the deaths of so many nascent soul immortals. Furthermore, his method of breeding such a vast number of gold-devouring beetles must be thoroughly investigated. The resentment in his tone was unmistakable. It was clear he had suffered greatly in his battle with Han Li. I hope that is indeed the case, the red-haired elder muttered. Fortunately, his gold-devouring beetles have not yet fully matured. Otherwise, had he released 10,000 fully mature beetles, even the 4 great elders might have been forced to retreat. The other elders exchanged glances and could only offer bitter smiles. As immortals of the soaring tribes, they knew better than anyone the terror of fully matured gold-devouring beetles. Just as a sense of relief settled over the room, the nascent soul seated within the green mist suddenly let out a piercing shriek. It clutched its head and rolled in agony, its form flickering as though on the verge of dispersing. Not good. Everyone act quickly. The red-haired elder shouted in alarm. The remaining elders reacted instantly, summoning their spell flags once more. Under the control of their seals, 4 dense clouds of green mist shot toward the center of the chamber, enveloping the nascent soul in an attempt to stabilize it. Time passed slowly as the 4 elders poured their strength into the formation. Gradually, the anguished screams faded. After a while longer, the nascent soul once again sat cross-legged, desperately absorbing the green mist to steady itself. After an unknown interval, the nascent soul spoke weakly, as though struggling to catch its breath. Many, many thanks for your assistance. I am fine now. You may stop. The 4 elders felt an immense sense of relief and withdrew their spells. In truth, they had already been pushing themselves to their limits. Though they could have continued doing so, would have inflicted lasting damage to their vitality. Unable to restrain himself, the pale old man asked Brother Gui, "What caused your nascent soul to destabilize once more?" This was exceedingly dangerous. The nascent soul clenched its teeth. Fellow Taoists, please do not worry. Nothing further will occur. It is merely that my connection to my gold-devouring beetle was severed. My spiritual sense was affected. The red-haired elder's heart sank. What? The gold-devouring beetle perished. How could this be? Mature gold-devouring beetles are nearly indestructible. How could one be destroyed so easily? After some contemplation, the pale old man said slowly, "This is not particularly strange. Without Brother Gui personally commanding it, its destruction was inevitable. There exist several top-grade Devil Dao techniques capable of directly annihilating the soul without harming the body." "Oh," the fourth shriveled elder said hesitantly, "then this person must be a Devil Dao cultivator." Yet during our initial battle, most of his techniques did not appear to originate from the Devil Dao. At those words, the elders exchanged looks of confusion and dismay. Silence once more filled the chamber. Meanwhile, in a distant place, Han Li drew in a deep breath within the carriage, a sense of relief finally settling in his heart. After half a month of unceasing effort, he had at last wiped away the soul imprint within the mature gold-devouring beetle and absorbed it into the yin, sifting banner. Throughout this entire process, the Grey Heron tribe had not disturbed him even once, much to his unexpected delight. Naturally, he was utterly unaware that in destroying the beetle's soul, he had nearly exterminated its original master in that very instant. Han Li waved his hand, grasping at the black devilish key before him. With a rush of wind, a small black banner flew out of the mist and landed in his palm. The remaining black fog churned violently, transforming into a black-green nascent soul. In its hands was a massive glittering golden beetle. Beneath it lay a white jade box, all of its seals removed. Han Li toyed with the small banner as his gaze swept over the golden beetle. It measured nearly half a foot in length, bearing a pair of vicious inch-long fangs and a fiendish appearance. It was several times larger than the gold-devouring beetles in his own swarm. Yet the beetle was utterly lifeless, devoid of spirit and vitality. After pondering for a moment, Han Li gestured toward the yin-sifting banner. A fist-sized sphere of green light flew out, revolving once before him before drifting downward. The green light was identical in appearance to the mature gold-devouring beetle, though smaller in size. Its body was tainted black, and its eyes gleamed with a sinister scarlet glow. "Go," Han Li commanded, pointing forward. The beetle's soul shot forth in a streak of black light, plunging back into its original body. In an instant, crimson light flared from the massive golden beetle. It unfurled its wings and began circling around Han Li's second nascent soul. A satisfied smile crept across Han Li's face. "If my judgment is correct," he murmured, "treating this insect as a refined demon corpse should suffice. Though its power is far inferior to its original state, it should still be extraordinarily formidable. If I wish to truly control it, I will need to refine it once more with devilish qi." That's all for today's content. See you in the next part. Support me by becoming a member. It will give me more motivation. Thank you so much.